Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to the latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Another Monday evening, and of course Edwin is once again with me. Hi Edwin, how are you going?
God save the king, Martin. God save the king.
Indeed. We must be careful what we talk about, because we were talking about the Queen just a couple of weeks ago.
We were talking about the Queen a few weeks ago, and look at this, and we're talking about all adversities and what's around the corner. You know what? Look, on that point, why don't we keep on talking about politicians?
See, well, we can just move a few of them away. That's probably right. Yes, makes you wonder, doesn't it? But there is a lot going on, of course, and I'm quite interested that over the last 4 or 5 days it's been wall-to-wall kings and queens. But of course, there's a lot of property stuff going on around, so we should probably focus on property again, because that is after the purpose of the rant. But it is interesting.
Oh, look, it is. It is. One can only think about property. I mean, who inherits everything now? Is it King Charles? Is it? There's a lot of property there in that family.
Yeah, 28 racehorses or something, right? So
28 racehorses. Some jewel that's worth $400 million or something like that. I mean, the list goes on. But then again, let's get stuck into it, Martin. Let's get stuck into it. And again, I want to start the rant with a riddle. Okay. Yeah, riddle me this, Martin. Is history on the side of the homeowners? I do have a caveat. Owners that can hold out, that is, owners that can hold out for a while. Is history on the side of the owners? What do you think?
I suppose you mean this one here, which of course is from the AFR today, saying, can history save house prices again? And basically the thesis is that UBS believes that prices will only slide about 7% because the RBA will soon be lifting rates just slightly more, then going sideways, and then cutting rates in the middle of next year. So that's probably the most bullish forecast that I've seen so far. And I don't know what you think, but seems a bit OTT to me. But that is what they're saying. And as you say, they're saying if you hang in there, everything will be fine. Prices will go up again.
Well, that's it. That's the caveat, isn't it? How long can it last? How long? If you think that the RBA is going to save the property market, how long before? You've got to ask yourself the question, how long before they will step in? Is it early 2023, mid 2023, end of 2023? How long are they going to let the market drop? You and I know, and we spoke about, we knew from back that the question was, do we save the property market or do we save the economy? Which one? They're juggling some very prickly balls around about the place. So it's a matter of, what do they really want to say? What do they want to do? We said that they were going to go into strife, but we also said that the reserve banks aren't going to. They're not. The governments aren't really going to be interested in taking over a role of governorship of a country and watch this whole thing crumble. They were going to throw everything at it. And this is the next thing that's going to be talked about. We've talked about a number of them, and I think we did bring the rate cuts ourselves in one of our scenarios in a previous rant. But look, it's out there. It's going to be spoken about it. Obviously, there is a call, there is a want for this the slowdown in property prices, which we're going to talk a bit more about later on as well in the top with the Tom Panos index. But Danielle DiMartino Booth, she brings out an interesting graph in one of her tweets as well. So we made the world news, Martin. We've made the world news, as they say. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi.
Well, that's right. So yes, the falling house prices have indeed made world headlines, and in fact there was a couple of other reports, one from Frank Knight, who's a global real estate firm, showing that New Zealand and Australia were leading the way down in terms of price falls. And it is quite interesting. Tarek, of course, looks at this information quite often. And it's interesting because he actually had this chart, which actually shows the relative fall of Australian house prices from the start of the fall compared with the US. And so the dotted one is the trajectory of US falls over the subsequent 5 months, right? And here you have Sydney and Melbourne and the 5 capital city averages, which are falling faster than what happened in the US around 2008. So anybody who thinks that we're in a minor correction in terms of property needs to have a look at that chart, because what we are seeing here is a considerable readjustment in terms of values, and it's early days yet. Remember that the full work through of those rate rises, I should say, in terms of impact on houses and therefore house owners and their mortgage payments hasn't really flown through yet, right? And there's more to come. So we are already seeing very early signs of considerable falls. Now, the key question, which, there is no one right answer here, is how far will the RBA be not okay, but will live with falling house prices? At what point do they start to then fret about the economic impact of falling house prices? But of course, the overlay here is inflation, and Philip Lowe and everybody else, all the other central bankers, keep saying we have to crush inflation. And it seems to me that until they can actually prove that inflation is actually under control, in other words, somewhere approaching its 2 to 3% band, they've got very little wriggle room to turn rates the other way. So I'm afraid that some of the people who are spruiking a big turnaround very soon, I think it is spruik, and I think that if you don't take seriously the inflation challenge that the central banks are dealing with, at your peril, I think this is the real critical question for me.
Look, most definitely, and the other thing is that chart that Tarek put up is Core Logic, and Core Logic obviously, their numbers and are somewhat delayed. So it's a matter of, I guess you could sort of extrapolate that a little bit more and start taking the averages further down the track. And look, perhaps you say you and I say that best case scenario is that there's 72 days in arrears with their data, with their information. It lags a little bit longer than that. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt, and let's even call it 60 days. So there is a bit of a lag with that data and that information being a Core Logic report. So it's going to be, it is going to be interesting, and anything that, any stimulus, any cushioning, anything that the government will do, anything that to try and slow down this fall is going to take time. And this is what I say. The caveat, in that question that we led with, is how long will property owners, how long can they hold before everything else comes into play? I mean, immigration is definitely going to come into play, and it's going to affect certain pockets in certain areas of Sydney. There is a demographic perception that I often talk about. You've got to look at the different markets within Sydney and the demographics within Sydney as to why certain suburbs will stay popular and there'll be the falls aren't felt as much as other suburbs, and the other reasons as to whether first-time buyers have bought and bought very much heavily leveraged. So all these factors are going to be playing out. So it's really just a matter of time and how long can they hold, and how many more mills, unfortunately, the mortgage holders can do without in order to not to stave off the banks, as we would say, and not get into mortgage delinquency. They'll obviously may get into arrears and then into delinquency after 90 days. But it's really a matter of a time. How quickly will all these other factors that you and I talk about will be at play? In which markets will that be influenced? Some markets will be influenced considerably, which is the first-time buyers bracket that you and I talked about, because the first-time buyers are the sacrificial lambs to all this.
Yeah, they are, absolutely. And of course, the current government is talking about bringing forward their shared equity scheme into regional areas 3 months earlier than previously planned, which is another example of trying to bring stuff forward. But again, that's 10,000 places and it's pretty limited. And the problem you've got, as you say, is that every time you do something to sort of stoke the property fire, what you're then doing is stoking inflation, which of course is working against what the Reserve Bank is trying to do, which is to get inflation under control. So I think there are some limitations on how far and how fast these other policies can be brought in to try and stave the falls in property prices. And as you say, in the meantime, the debt burden increases, the monthly mortgage repayments are increasing, and more people are going to find it very difficult. So we are, I think, in a quite uncomfortable position. And just in absolute terms, of course, we're still very leveraged in terms of the total debt pool we have in Australia. And property prices relative to income or GDP are high here than almost anywhere else around the world. So we have a tendency, I think, to probably think falls are going to continue and accelerate rather than actually get turned around anytime soon. But as you say, how long can you hold on?
Yeah, look, one of the interesting things that you and I often talk about are factors outside of the property market that influence the property market, or the effects of the issues around the property market, whether it be the rental side of things, or whether it be ownership or lack of ownership, right, and lack of affordable accommodation, and that is crime. Crime is one thing for sure, is that it's surging, and that is there's a lot of it that's been the crime. Petty theft and petty crime has increased a lot of all places in the eastern suburbs, from what our legal eagles tell us, and they're the sideline effects, or the after effects that a lot of the reporters don't really cotton on to, the so-called property reporters, because they don't look at the bigger picture. They're more interested and focused on the one-off sale that got property that got sold for millions of dollars. That's really beyond the majority of the population anyway, or properties that have got sold, which which Panos talks about, in his rant, talks about property that got sold $1 million over value, but then he spends very little time on the fact that property was the reserve that the council, Fairfield Council, had on that property. It went up $1 million over the reserve at the auction, but it was developers. It's a different market, a different flavour, and I'm sure the developers knew more what they could do with the land than what the real estate agent that was selling it knew themselves. So all these things that come into play. So I pay a lot of attention to the call it the aftermath, call it the ripple effect that goes into other areas of people's lives, because it's really sad as to when you have to understand, and you get an understanding of what's happening around Sydney, and particularly around the rental market, as I often talk about. But I guess one of the things, Martin, that is going to help somewhat cushion this effect is if vendors and the confidence wanes, and they start taking the market, and we could say that Switzer's dreams have come true.
Yeah, well, this is what Switzer said right back then, of course, that maybe vendors will actually take properties off the market, and if that does, that's going to adjust the supply and demand equilibrium. I guess we'll see. Clearly, some vendors in my surveys are now saying, well, we're not prepared to meet the market yet. We understand prices are falling, but maybe we'll just take property off at the moment. And that may be one of the reasons why, in fact, the spring season looks pretty weak relative to where perhaps some people thought it was going to be. So that'll be interesting to play out. But maybe Mr. Switzer had some point to make.
Well, look, the confidence isn't there, isn't it? You and I have been talking about those confidence levels, yep, and the psychology behind why do the property reporters focus on auctions? It's because it's highly charged with emotion, and buying or selling property or renting property can be very, very emotional on both sides of the fence. So we're here to help people manage that emotion and try to understand and bring more logic into the equation, as opposed and take away a lot of the emotion in order for them to make a better decision for the future. So all these things that are playing out. So I guess going back to the initial reports as to the falls in the market, what could cushion or what potentially is going to be cushioning the falls, or the speed of the falls in a lot of areas of Sydney. We've talked about rent increases, we talked about immigration, builders hitting the wall, lack of construction, issues around construction. So therefore, you're not getting new properties on the market in order to cater. So therefore, there's a bit of more of a demand, in particular around this whole premise of taking properties off the market from for sale, like what we've seen also in the rental arena with regards to apartments. We're seeing starting to see a big shift with apartments for sale moving across for rent because of that rental squeeze in many parts of Sydney. So they're all the things that could play out, and with the rental increases that are happening faster than what you can say. Call the property manager, my dunny's blocked again. It's a situation that investors are going to be tempted to come back into the market again. But interesting, Martin, is a point that I know I might pine on, but the first home buyers, it's that space that the rental yield is somewhat more attractive than buying a higher priced property. So again, over and over again, all I'm seeing, have been seeing for the last 6 or so weeks, is how much the more obvious is how much the first home buyers, that bracket for first home buyers, how much the first home buyers have become the sacrificial lamb to this government and the last.
Absolutely. It's continuous, isn't it? And I always remind people that when governments say we're helping you to get into the market for the first time, that's bringing forward, of course, future purchases. They're actually not really helping individuals. What they're doing is actually trying to help the economy, right? They're helping builders, they're helping the construction sector, they're helping the GDP. And quite often in my surveys now, those people who were brought in over the last 18 months or so, right at the top, in some cases getting very high loan to value ratio loans on very low rates, are precisely the ones now who are absolutely under the hammer, with considerable increases in terms of mortgage repayments already happening, with the loan to value ratio now going really off because, of course, they've got very little equity, and so starting to see negative equity flow in as well there now. And so it's worth just saying to prospective first-time buyers, be really, really careful now, because the chances are that they're going to try and, kid you to come back into the market at a time when probably the best thing to do is just sit on the side and wait to see what happens.
Yeah, negotiate that lease, or put your tail between your legs and go ask for hospice in your back of your parents' place.
Yeah, exactly. And it's worth saying, isn't it? You've got the further lockdowns in China with COVID. You've got the Ukraine-Russia situation, with Ukraine pushing back into areas that had been previously invaded by Russia. And, is that going to escalate into something different? Or, there are so many externalities that are also quite uncertain at the moment. So, sometimes doing nothing is better than doing something.
Yeah. Look, sometimes doing something is like playing Russian roulette, isn't it?
Well, that could well be, actually. Yeah. And what about the WeChat chatters? Of course, it's a particularly auspicious time in China at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it's somewhat quiet, relievingly for a lot of people that can focus away. Look, it's an absolute shit show over there with regards to the economy and the way things are playing out, and nothing's really going to change for the better. Not until this committee meeting happens in mid-October, and then a lot of people are saying that the lockdowns could even keep on rolling right through till January, February next year. It's all about control. But look, yes, they've been busy with the Moon Festival or the Mid-Autumn Festival, as some may refer to it as, call it as that. But one of the things that we noticed was that we weren't able to get the mooncakes for Dusty and Evan this year from One Joe. They sold out. And again, it's because of the supply chain issues. They didn't produce as many as what they would have otherwise, and so we had to make do with what we would call second tier mooncakes. You can see the girls there; they're not very impressed.
No, I was going to say they are clearly just looking at them rather than chow downing, which is interesting. So obviously, the real McCoy is required.
Oh, that's right. Like, we couldn't fool them. You can't fool Dusty and Evan, that's for sure.
And what about the local WeChat chats? What's going on there?
Look, they're livid. They're absolutely livid. I don't know if you saw that article, that post with regards to Australian Post. What they're doing, basically, it's there in that snapshot that I sent you there. They're temporarily. There are temporary delivery delays for items sent to Australia by sea mail which is rather interesting. They're calling it that this is due to the increased numbers of prohibited items coming into Australia by sea. Now, this is from all over the world, and obviously the WeChat chatters are all over this because a lot of the goods and a lot of the products are still coming over from, we're able to get goods from Alibaba and so forth from China, and so they're absolutely. But now there's a lot of this has big ramifications in the small home business type of enterprises, because obviously you got people that import stuff from America and all parts of the world, Japan, and they on sell through their online platform. So is this? Are they really concerned about shit that's coming over that people are sending, or is this a way to basically get the local consumers to stop buying stuff online and start going to Westfields? Is this a Westfield influence? What do you reckon, mate?
Well, who knows? It's certainly interesting, but as you say, if the supply chains are disrupted because people can't send stuff by sea, they can still send it by air, of course, but that's more expensive. It just begs the question, isn't it, as to what the real motivations are, and as with all of these things, what they say and why they're really doing it could be two different things, couldn't they?
Yeah, look, it's all playing out, but it's really all again hurting the people that are trying to make something, hurting the people that are trying to make that extra money in order to afford the mortgage repayments, because some I think again Tarek brought out an analysis of how much it would cost, how much extra it's going to cost from the beginning of this year to now, how much extra mortgages are costing people, and we're talking $1,200 a month for the average mortgage, which is crazy.
Huge amount, absolutely huge amount. And of course, the other cost of living are also still rising, and that's from power and school fees and childcare costs and going down the supermarkets, and pretty wherever you look, people are getting tight, and I see it in my surveys, mortgage stress continues to rise, more people are struggling with trying to balance all of these things, and the mortgage goes up each month, and those payments are still lagged by a couple of months from the latest increases, so they know there's more coming down the tubes as well. And so that's putting a huge pressure on many households. Sure, some have buffers, but even Mr. Lowe last week when he was giving his presentation said, well, most buffers are sitting amongst the most affluent households. Well, that stays in the blooming obvious, right? But the implicit side is, well, clearly other people are going to get hurt by this. He actually conceded that. So I thought it was quite interesting. I put that up on Twitter last week.
Yeah, I saw that. It was rather, and he was really, he did a double take. He didn't know which way to go. I think if the ground, could swallow him, he would have just jumped straight in. It is interesting what's happening there, Martin. But it's uncanny how it's so obvious. It's so obvious as the nose on their faces, but yet they choose to overlook a lot of these things and make crazy decisions. It is what it is, and we keep on living, and we keep on struggling through these adverse times.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about hot air, or the lack of it, shall we?
The hot air is no longer there. I'm a poet and I didn't even know it. So it's rather interesting. So, I mean, surprise, surprise. The rate rises weigh on spring selling enthusiasm. When we're talking about it, and a lot of when you read the article, it all focuses back on auction clearance rates, auction activity and the like. But as we shared last week, there was 570 or so, 71 auctions or so across New South Wales, but there were over 22,000 open house inspections. The media should be focusing on that just as much as the auctions. But it's interesting. But you only have to look at why has a lot of that hot air, that emotion went, apart from the obvious economic factors. But the real estate industry has a lot to do with it, and it's the way that they play the game. It's the way the shenanigans that they're playing, and therefore, in a way, it's real estate agents themselves that are forcing the prices to come lower than what they should really be coming down because of the low ball games they play, or the pricing low to watch it go.
Absolutely. And of course, the fact that people are only talking about the auction clearances when most transactions are not anything to do with auctions, right, is the critical point. And it's also worth underscoring. We see many, many examples now of properties on the market listed and then being reduced, and quite substantially, right? Which shows that vendors, if they have to sell, are having to come down to meet the market.
Yeah, and again, and the reason why they do that is because, as we shared before, the it's again the agents themselves that are that they I put it up as a real estate education 101 on one of the tweets there. I put it up last week, and it said, this is real estate down to the nuts and bolts in a way. So you buy the listing, and that's a real estate agent going in and telling a potential vendor that they can achieve the higher price. That's called buying the listing. Everybody else quotes at 10, 15% below what this particular agent quotes it at. So obviously it gets the vendors all excited and motivated, so they get the listing. So that's what we call buying the listing. Then, of course, they convince the owner to, for an underquoting campaign, in other words, price it low to watch it go, which is, considered to be underquoting. Then the purpose or the primary job of the agent in these scenarios is really not to get the highest price for the property. The primary job is to really what we call crunch the vendor or condition the vendor to accept the price on the day. And like in the industry, it's called, usually it starts 2 weeks prior to the auction. That's basically telling the vendor to meet they need to meet the price, meet the market. The auction price is the market, as many pundits keep on telling us over and over again. And then vendor's bid, obviously, a bit of a sideline here. Vendor's bid is the bid to suck people in, to try and get others to commit, thinking to make them believe that the property is on the market. And then, of course, you've got to have the celebration at the end, Martin. You know about psychology, you understand all this. If you don't celebrate at the end, your buyer ends up getting buyer's remorse, and everybody in the street thinks, oh shit, what's going on? But because there's a celebration, it's almost the rest of the community that's looking at your auction, thinking about selling their property. It's almost like an acceptance that, look, that is the market now, and look, there was a celebration about it, so everybody's happy. So that their feeling starts to change as well, and they, again, they begin to accept the lower price. So again, it's something that the industry has a funny way of dictating what happens, or how fast the market falls, or how fast it rises.
And the key point you've made, I think, for me, is how underquoting then fits into that overall architecture of that process. So it's not just an isolated element, is it? It's actually part of that entire story.
No, that's right. And it happens with not only at auctions, but underquoting happens also with private treaty campaigns, because it's the guides that the agents give you when you ask them for a guide. It's just to suck you in, to pull you in, to start creating interest, or as what we call, try to create urgency. That if you don't start negotiating, start putting offers in, you're going to get you're going to miss out. And if it's a private treaty campaign, generally what they end up doing is Dutch auctioning your offers anyway to others. So it's really what we would otherwise call a backdoor auction or a Dutch auction.
Yeah, I think your mortgages are wanting more food, but as long as the sound of it, is that right?
Yeah, no, she wants to go out because we've got Prince in the other studio.
Okay.
So so that's Evan. She's the curious one, so she wants to go out and meet Prince. We haven't introduced them yet because he's to each other as yet. We're keeping them in the separate studios, until we know that Prince is settled in and is 100%. So he's come back.
Fair enough. I'll tell you, as an aside, when I was talking to somebody the other day who works in the pet rescue part of the industry, and they've had a significant rise in the number of households handing back the pets that they got through COVID because they can't now afford to keep them any longer. And they're really worried about the volume of pets being handed back because more people are now under pressure because of the inflation and higher mortgage rates and things. So they think that this is going to go through really balloon out and go through the roof over the next couple of months.
Yeah, which is something, again, that you and I have discussed about in our rants, and the issues, the fact that a lot of families, it's not only that they can't afford because of the food, and the litter can be very expensive, and keeping them, especially if you, God forbid, they end up getting sick or catching something or having an accident. But then the other thing is when you have to vacate your rental home, and you go to try to downsize or go to another property, that you're not necessarily going to. A lot of property managers, for some reason, have become really, they're staying away from people with pets. So therefore, that's another reason why they're being handed back to shelter, which is really a shame. We shouldn't be here. We really should not be here. But for the stupid, ignorant policies that we've had from both sides of the fence over the last 20, 25 years.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, it is structural. It's been created by bad policy. Let's go on to the numbers, because they're quite interesting, aren't they?
Look, they are. The numbers are, as we've been saying, we've been keeping a very close eye on the numbers for the beginning of spring. We saw a rising listing numbers across winter, and now we're getting a retraction. But again, it's to do, a lot of it's to do with market sentiment. We're not getting the for sale listings that are taken off market. They're not being replaced as readily with new for sale listings. The pain, as you and I have spoken about, hasn't filtered through yet with the mortgage rate rises, but they will, and we may see a lot more listings rise closer to the middle of spring and moving on toward the end. But one of the interesting things that I've noticed, Martin, and we've been noticing with the team, is how many apartments are moving from the for sale side of the fence to the for lease. So there's a shift, and is it any? Because one of the reasons is obviously because the apartment market is going down very, very rapidly. In a lot of cases that we've investigated some apartments for clients in your Parramatta's and around those areas, where you could actually buy an apartment in many of the buildings for less than what people paid off the plan in 2015. So is it any wonder why then the owners basically, they can only go backwards so far, and in a way they're thinking that they can recoup some of the costs, or trying to see if the things will turn around for the better, and they would have a better position of selling later on in the year, next year, who knows. But yeah, that's an interesting shift with the apartment market. And look, again, auction numbers are still very subdued. So again, it's that lackluster confidence with regards to the auction clearances and or the as much as you could say that auction clearance rates have gone a little bit up. Even as Tarek puts out in his, in his analysis from observations from 36 last week to 39 this week, it's a small rise, but and people are saying vendors are meeting the market, but at what cost? But overall, the confidence is just not there for us to go back to that those numbers that we were seeing even in 2021, where we were closer to the 1,000. On market, sale to for sale on market by way of auction, even though we were in more precarious conditions around COVID and mandates.
Absolutely, it's an object lesson in terms of how to think about the market, and I think Tarek does a really good job in terms of reporting those trends. But we have to remind everybody again that the auctions part of the market is a very small part of the overall situation, particularly, as you say, more people are deciding maybe to take their property off the market and try and let it, particularly apartments. And again, some of my analysis and surveys highlights that those outer suburban areas where there a lot of the high-rise developments were bought in 2015 to 2018 are actually where now many, many more are coming on as rentals. And interestingly, the rents that they're asking are up a bit, but not as much as many people were expecting. So that's a supply-demand issue there as well. So interesting how that plays out. And of course, we have to go on now to the wackier than the wackier conspiracy theory, right? What's wackier than a conspiracy theory, Edwin?
It's wackier than a conspiracy theory. Well, yeah, we've talked about fake auctions. Now we're going to be talking about hybrid auctions. It is absolutely laughable what's going on out there. The agents, novices in the industry, they know how the hell to control even the marketing campaigns. It's a comedy fest, a comedy show out there. And this is from one of our followers, one of our viewers that sent me this. It was rather interesting. It says, he asked the question, can you take a highest bidder inside to negotiate if the auction is, if the auction is still live? When I first read that, I thought, what's going on here? It hadn't passed in yet. And of course you can't. You're not meant to. I'm not saying that you can't. There's no black and white rule. There are some black and white rules around auctions, but this isn't one of them. No, not really. The auction hasn't concluded. I say the bidder is probably a stooge and panicked that they had the last bid on the day. Hence, they have to take him in and calm him down, or else he will spill the beans. That was my take on it, because it was wacky. Like to start reading this. Look, at the end of the day, lo and behold, that they come out from all that negotiation, and there's another bidder in the crowd, and decides to bid $1,000 more than the last bid, and obviously, they whispered in his ear that his is still lower, and they try to get him up. I think one or two other bids got placed post that, but the property got passed in anyway. So and then he writes, so now we've got hybrid auctions. Half in the open and half behind closed doors. Fools.
Gosh, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Because basically you've got no idea what was going on behind the closed doors, as you say, whether there was a real alternative bid or whether it was just a fake bid, trying to get somebody else to go a little higher. Gosh, that really is takes the cake, doesn't it?
And this is the thing that I take to task, the regulations, right? And those more so the authorities that are meant to be controlling this, and that the auctions can be. There are some very strict guidelines. For example, you as a buyer, you can't collude with another buyer to keep the price down. But what's happening here, it's almost perceived as collusion with the agent in that particular buyer. Like I said. Somebody that's been in the industry like myself for almost 25 years or thereabouts, that was my first reaction. He's obviously a dummy bidder, and he's panicking. He's probably pooping his pants and thinking, shit, I've got the highest bid here. I'm going to own a property that I don't even want to buy. I mean, what else could it be? So all this collusion happens from the sales side of things, but yet as a buyer, you can't collude. No. You've got underquoting, and we're meant to, and it's meant to, in an auction campaign, in an auction sale, is meant to be the most transparent sales. It's all bullshit. It really, it's all theatrics. And the sooner that people understand this, the sooner that we can do away with auction campaigns, and we can bring about more clarity and more transparency to the way the properties are transacted moving forward. But whilst all this shenanigans is allowed to go on, we're never going to get there. But it's theatre, it's theatrics as far as I'm concerned.
We'll talk about more theatrics. What about the Tom Panis Property Price Index then? That's another example of one swallow doesn't make a summer, huh?
Well, now look, you've seen. I know if you want to put every screenshot, I'm keeping a screenshot of all his weekly comments. But I actually, just before the rant, I listened to his rant on his take. Now, all of a sudden, he's got 8 out of 12. So what's that's a 66% clearance rate, according to him. So I don't know. The only thing that he's failed to say was, "We're back, baby, we're back." But now he's blaming the RBA in that particular rant, in that video that he posted up there. He's blaming the RBA. So on the one hand, he's saying, the market is still strong. People are still spending. People are still buying. if you sold a property for $1 million over the reserve, which is the development site that I referred to earlier on, he's talking about all that. On the other hand, he's saying that the RBA should stop raising rates so rapidly. They should pretty much start cutting rates again. Blah blah blah. This that. Which one is it? So we've had hot, cold, lukewarm, and now blame everybody else except except the market.
Well, the idea is if you throw the darts all over the dartboard, at least one should hit the triple, right?
Not if you're a believer in, or if you're a taker of that white powder that he talks about.
No, but it does just show. And look, it's interesting. I'm not sure that many people within the real estate sector understand why the RBA is doing what they're doing, right? Because there is a context here about the battle for inflation, and not just the Australian battle for inflation, but the battle in the Federal Reserve and in Canada and the UK and New Zealand and the Eurozone, pretty much all Western economies. They're all fighting that same battle. And the root cause of that massive amount of inflation was the ultra low interest rates and all the government stimulus that was done over the last couple of years, which was an echo of what was done back in 2008. So there is a structural background to this that a lot of people don't get. And so suddenly accusing the RBA of wobbling the housing market because they've taken rates too high is without understanding the context. And that's the problem. So a lot of people in the industry, a lot of writers actually, a lot of the people who actually are on the real estate portals, all they're grizzling about is just property prices without this context, right? And the point is that the more that the Fed says we're going to go higher for longer, which is what they keep saying, the more other central banks around the world have to follow because of the exchange rate differentials. And that means that the chances of the RBA turning turtle and saying, oh, well, we'll give up now and house prices have become so critical that we're going to actually stop cutting rates, stop lifting rates and start cutting rates. That's a very naive situation because even Phil Lowe last week said, if we don't get inflation under control, the long-term consequences for everybody is absolutely dire. So I despair sometimes, Edwin, about how myopic a lot of this discussion is.
Yeah, look, 100%, Martin. And this, most agents don't even know, don't venture out past or have an understanding what's going on past their own backyards, which is a small geographical, map of 5 or 6 suburbs. It really is interesting. Look, I get the fact that there's still a lot of money out there. There are people that are cashed up. There are people that are being on the sideline waiting to come in, like the WeChat chatterers and and a lot of other people that you and I know that have made money in shares, made money in crypto, that have jumped in, that have waited, that are still waiting. Look, there are a number of people that put a lot of commentary on Twitter that I know for a fact that they are cashed up. They're waiting. They sold their properties and were looking to upsize. And they're just sitting back, and these are people that are cashed up. So, as you said, you've got to look at the context of what's happening globally to really understand how that's going to affect your backyard. But these guys, they don't look beyond their Facebook page, they don't look beyond their Instagram page, and they don't look beyond the local gym, perhaps. I don't know. Or the fun day at the beach. So you and I understand, how the dynamics and how things are moving, and we've talked about demographics and why people are buying, why people are paying more in certain parts of Sydney. Well, look, if you want to be around Vietnamese people, well, you got to stump up a fair bit of money still in your Cabramatta, because that is where they've congregated, and likewise in other parts of Sydney. So there's got to be more than just the one look, or blame the RBA, or let's clap this agent for getting 20% above reserve or this or that. It's a silly thing. But look, we just put it on here because it's good commentary. Again, it's theatrics. It's a whole thing. The more people understand how much of theatre this market really is, that can learn to make logical decisions. I think that's what I believe that you and I have always wanted our followers and our viewers to learn and understand, so that they can have a better advantage and be more empowered when they go out there and try to take on these agents with the shenanigans, face to face.
Yeah, it's going below the surface, isn't it, and understanding what's really going on rather than what superficially might be thought to be going on. And it's worth reminding everybody, of course, that real estate agents are paid predominantly on commission, and so they want to get a transaction. They'll do anything to get a transaction, pretty much. Sell their grandmother, doesn't say whatever, do whatever, just to get a transaction. Now, I should say, not all agents are the same. There are some good ones out there. There are some really good ones, but many aren't, and many will do or say anything just to try and get a transaction, and that includes vendor bids and all sorts of things, and dummy bids and bits and pieces. Now, and on that point, Edwin, the vendor bid question is really interesting, isn't it? Because there is a huge amount of confusion about what a vendor bid is, and is the property actually on the market when the vendor bid is actually made?
Nine out of 10 times the property isn't on the market when the vendor's bid is made. In New South Wales, under New South Wales legislation, the vendor has one bid, and that's really just to spur the market on, or to stimulate. It's meant to be that we're on the market, or we're close to it, to the reserve. But it's being misused because there's no real hard and fast rules around vendor's bid, other than the fact that the agent has to, in his preamble, him or her, the auctioneer they have to notify the crowd whether or not the vendor is going to make a bid on the day, right? And if that is not part of the preamble, well, theoretically, in the black letter of the law, the vendor has no bid. There may be one scheduled, but if he's forgotten to mention it, well, guess what? That it doesn't stand. But again, you got to prove that. So,
sorry, Edwin, just on that. So let's be clear: before the auction gets underway formally, the auctioneer in New South Wales has to declare if the vendor is going to make a vendor bid.
That's correct. It has to be a verbal declaration, verbal or in writing, but it's usually verbal in front of the crowd. So everybody's clear that the vendor holds one bid, right?
So they can't just spring it on you halfway through the auction and say, "Oh, the vendor bid's just all right." No, you've got to actually set it up.
That's correct.
Yeah. So what happens if, in fact, they haven't set it up, and then they actually do insert a vendor bid?
Well, this is the whole thing. You've got to, if you take issue with that, unless you know, unless you would know if you're participating, if you're participating in the auction, and you say, hold on a minute, well, you can take the auctioneer to task. This is what I say to people over and over again. Just because the auctioneer is loud and boisterous, that doesn't mean that you can't rebut what they're saying. Part of one of my many strategies when attending auction is I want to converse with them. I want to converse with the auctioneer. I want to have the dialogue. I want to. From my side of things, I call it. I want to bait them into either getting emotional themselves or getting angry with me, or I want to take them for a ride. If I could use that, I want to take them for a journey. Is a better word, right? I want them to get into my vehicle, and for me to be the driver of the auction, not for them to drive. Not for them to drive me to where they want to take me. I want to take them to where I want them to be, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So unless you have that dialogue, you're not going to get there. You've got all the right in the world to question these things. So now our viewers know. So you've got to be Tyson. You've got to go in there and stand toe to toe with these. Be like Tyson, stand toe to toe. Your opponent may be. That they may come across as being 7 foot tall and built like a brick dunny, outdoor dunny, and you can and they may be overbearing, but you just sit back, and if you know your rights, if you know what's that you are within your rights, you can ask them that question. So again, just going back, so 9 out of 10 times a vendor's bid does not mean that the property is not on the market. So if the vendor bid is called, you can ask the question, are we on the market? That's just simple. If you're not sure, just ask the question.
Yep.
Just put your hand up like you do in the classroom and ask, are we on the market?
So the point there is that if a vendor bid then comes in, which is moving the price up from where the previous bid was,
yeah,
what they're trying to do is to get somebody else to come over the top, right, to lift the price. So that's the mechanism, isn't it? But you still don't know whether it's actually formally on the market or not.
No. Look, over the last 12 months, I would say 50% of the auctions that we've attended, the auctioneers have made a point and they've said we will not be calling the property on the market. We will not be advising you when the property is whether the property is on the market or not, and they'll try to but again, it goes back to be persistent. Just because they tell you doesn't mean that you're not going to encourage. Like you've got to find a way to. You can ask a question many different ways in order to get to the answer that you want to. So you want to know.
Yep.
And this came about by, again, our mate Parapower that put up a tweet says, Buyer of the Week award goes to buyer number one, as Justin Kwan said again. And again, fight like Tyson at auction. So basically this bidder had the highest bid at 1.3 million. Now, the auction stalled. Then the vendor's bid came in at 1,450,000, right? So they're driving him $150,000 more than where he stopped, and he was the only bidder. And then he put in a further bid of $5 more to try and see if he's going to get the property at 1,455,000. But he's the only bidder. So the tip of the week is, if you're the only bidder and the vendor bid comes in, don't get conned into trying to beat the vendor's bid, particularly if the property is not on the market. And this property, wasn't on the market. It was never on the market at that. But if you stopped at 1.3, then and then you got passed in at the vendor's bid of 1.45, right? Then you're pulling the vendor to meet you where you want them to be. In this case now, they know that they basically know, but all to do with perception, that you can actually pay more than the 1,455,000. So they've got the bunny in the bag, and now it'll take. It'll be interesting to see if the property gets told them at what price, and if bidder number one was the buyer. But if you'd stopped, the reverse would have happened, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So if you'd stopped at 1.3 and the vendor bid came in at 1.45, nothing else happened, you've still got, as the last recognised bid, first bids in terms of actually being able to negotiate afterwards.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And well, the thing is that, in my opinion, they've panicked, and they're thinking that they have to be the highest bidder on the day to negotiate with the vendor. But there was nobody else there.
No. So you can ignore the vendor bid when it comes to the landscape of the deal, as it were. If you were the last bidder before the vendor bid and there was no other bid afterwards, then you still hold the cut.
Yeah, nobody else participated. You hold. But again, it's one of those. It's what happens. Obviously, what happens on the day. Trying to read your opponents, you could say, trying to read those that are also interested in the property, what they're doing, where it is, but if you've done all your market research, and you can see that, as in many auctions and in many of the that our team have been going to in different parts of Sydney, there are a lot of people turning up. There's quite a number of people registering, but there's not a lot of participation.
So absolutely. And one other question, which is sort of ancillary but quite important. Sometimes they'll have people on the end of a phone, right? Or they'll get a bid from somebody who's remote. I always have a bit suspicious about some of those as well, perhaps wrongly, but it does seem quite convenient sometimes.
Look, and that again, that's one of the things that it comes back to how far you really want to take it to task, and how and at the end of the day, I don't think enough people make complaints to Fair Trading New South Wales to get a lot of act. People just sort of want to get over and done with. It becomes too emotionally charged. People just want to forget about it,
yep.
And they don't follow on with the complaints. But I don't blame them. Like I think I've shared a couple of years ago where a property reporter at that time from Domain and myself, we made a complaint to Fair Trading about an auction that was underquoted in Surrey Hills. In the terrace, I think it's the terrace where they found the old lady that had died and nobody knew that she'd passed away. I can't remember the lady's name. It was around there, and we made the complaint to Fair Trading, and I'm still waiting to hear from Fair Trading.
Yeah.
That's the sad part.
It is that indeed, but it does show, and I guess the message from those watching this is that don't be passive in auction context. You've got to actually play the game. You've got to understand what the game is, and be careful, because you can end up being bounced into doing things that actually doesn't serve your own interests very well if you're not careful.
Yeah, and look, we know that there are many that over the last, you would say, 3, maybe even perhaps closer to 6 months, more and more agents out there are playing chicken with Fair Trading, and they are introducing dummy bidders.
Yep.
And it's again, because I've seen these markets, these cycles twice over. It's sort of, for me, it's deja vu. The market turns, and along come the dummy bidders or mates to try and support and try to create that interest. Why? Again, because it is because they want to. They're focusing on emotion.
Yep.
And they're trying to get you in from that whole psychological side of things, more so than from a tell me the logic and behind the sale. It's more plays out more on the day around that emotional side of things. Like somebody said a week or so ago, agents manage the vendors. Spouses need to manage their partners on the day. Because it gets so much.
Good advice there, actually. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think very, very important messages once again, Edwin. And where we are now with this uncertainty in the market, and with prices on the wobble, and with agents getting desperate to try and shift stuff, we're going to see more shenanigans. So people need to be very careful and very cautious, and make sure you do all work and all those things we've said previously, but also understand the sport of auctions.
It is a sport.
It is, exactly right. That's the way to think about it. Edwin, very good. Thank you very much. Great work as always. And I guess we'll do it all again next week. There'll be plenty more to talk about.
Yeah, let's keep on talking about politicians.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Take care. See you later. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.